All right, I am live today with Lloyd de Jongh. We're continuing our series that we are calling Islam's Apologetics. Sonia was unable to join us today due to a scheduling conflict, but we'll have her back for future episodes. Today, we're going to be talking about how deeply embedded lying is within the Islamic faith. Before we get started, let me open us with a word of prayer. Dear God, thank you for this time together. Thank you for all the people who are joining in. We thank you for the technology that allows us to share with a wide variety of people. We ask that any Muslims listening today have their hearts opened so that they can come to know you the way that we know you. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. All right, I think everything is working. So before we dive into the subject for today, why don't you give us a brief update on what you've been up to on your channel, Lloyd?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, could I share my screen? That makes it easy for me to just show everyone.
Yep, go right ahead.
If I can just do that, I'll just share my second screen. Oh, and it should be popping up now. Yeah. Hey, everyone, this is Lloyd. Yeah, just so you all know, the surname is actually de Jongh. I know it confuses everyone. It's a Dutch surname, pronounced de Jongh. Yeah, so I've been making some videos focusing on the Sharia, teaching people what it says, where to find all of the resources that I use. And these are the best scholarly and academic resources available. I've started with, and I have to thank Sonia for this. She's the one who encouraged me to go ahead and do this. And so I've got the scholarly rulings, the official position, not opinions, but the actual rulings from Islamic law on things like how they feel about Christians, about Jews, about the fact that abrogation are actually the mistakes of Muhammad that were corrected by Allah, and a discussion on jihad from one of Islam's top scholars, and then a second discussion on jihad from another modern scholar. And I've also just put out a video on what resources you can use. Part 1, I'll have part 2 ready this week on resources you can use to study Islam. So I am trying to equip apologists and polemicists who want to go out and actually rebut many of the things that are being said online, give them the tools and all the information that they need with all of the ironclad citations and references, along with the books they can download so that they can go and do a credible job in dealing with many of the misconceptions, the lies, the half-truths that are being spread online. So that's me.
Excellent, very good. So everyone, I encourage you to check out Lloyd's channel after the program. I know that the last time he was just getting started. He probably didn't have a lot of Islamic content up yet, but he does have a good amount of stuff now. So definitely check that out and give him a sub. The link to his channel can be found in the video description. Many of you have probably seen that I recently reached the minimum requirements for YouTube monetization, and I went ahead and turned that on after a survey showed that about 90% of you are in favor of that. I also opened a Patreon account. A couple of you signed up for that, so thank you very much. All funds that I receive either from Patreon or from YouTube ads will be going towards building the channel, getting outreach to more people. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and check out the link to my Patreon in the video description. I'll document all my income and expenses on Patreon so you can see exactly where the funds are going. I will warn you that I definitely will be spending more than I'm taking in, so I won't be making any money off of this. But if you do want to help out the ministry, that would be great. Donation of any amount will give you early access to my videos before I monetize them, so there won't be any ads on them. There are also several other ways you can help this channel grow. The most important is actually just to keep watching and liking the videos. Liking a video or watching a video all the way through, and then commenting or watching more videos, even if they're not my videos, those tell the algorithm that the video is engaging. YouTube makes money by showing more and more videos. So if you watch the whole video, that gives them from their perspective, that means it's a good video. And if you watch something else afterwards, that means you're staying engaged with their site, which they really like. So their algorithm favors videos that do that. And then if they're favored in the algorithm, they show up higher up on search, which then allows people who've never seen my channel before find them. Hopefully helps Muslims find them as well. You can also share my videos on social media and in YouTube comments of other channels where appropriate. I really appreciate everyone's support and really enjoy reading your encouraging comments. So thank you very much for those as well. The channel's been growing a lot faster than I originally expected, and I'm very pleased where this is heading. Coming up next, I will be continuing my series on how to understand apparent contradictions in the Bible. I'll be aiming for releasing that within the next week or two. Finally, before getting into today's presentation, I do want to lay out a couple ground rules. Very much welcome Muslim responses while we're talking, but it needs to actually be a response about what we're talking about. Attempts to change the subject, attempts to distract, etc. That'll all be ignored. Attention-seeking behavior will especially be ignored. So, make sure your comments are relevant to the video. Do try to say something more than just you're wrong or give your opinion. Cite authoritative sources. In particular, we're talking about Sharia law today. So ideally, you would be citing Sharia sources if you want to respond to what we're saying. Frankly, in Islam, common Muslim opinions about what the Quran or Sunnah teach are worthless. We know, and you no doubt know as well, that the scholars are the only ones who are qualified to interpret the text. So we expect you to reference scholars because that's what we're going to be doing. I won't hesitate to use the timeout feature if I need to, if anyone is ignoring these requests and so on. For the non-Muslims, if you see people misbehaving in the comments, go ahead and tell them to stop. And if they continue, I'll take action. If anything that we're saying is unclear or you want clarification, please ask. Legitimate comments, legitimate questions, very much welcome. We definitely appreciate that. So thanks everyone for your cooperation. So I will go ahead and turn the presentation over to Lloyd. We're going to be talking about lying in Islam today.
All right. Yeah, so today, everyone's familiar with the term taqiyya, which gets overused and is not as well understood as everyone thinks it is. But taqiyya is something that happens on a personal level. It's basically deception for the purpose, tactical deceit, for the purposes of spreading Islam. And I will come to a small definition of it as we go. But this is something done by your average Jongh, average Muslim. What is more important is that the Sharia law has a mechanism which is designed to circumvent the law, to break the law legally. And this is something at the level of the scholars, the ulama. That is, the learned ones. Those are the people who run Islam, who are responsible for interpreting the law. So they are capable of breaking the law. Every single oath, every promise, every treaty, every agreement, they can break them. And they have a tool for doing that. And that tool is called Hiyal. And I will get into that today. And we will discuss why Islam from top to bottom is a religion of deceit.
Before you start with the presentation, I think there's a good question here in the comments that is a good introduction. Born Again asks, is it true that Sharia law overrides the Quran?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Bluntly, it does. And there's a number of reasons for that. If we have time at the end, hopefully we do. This is not that long a presentation. I'll discuss some of that. But I will be going through some of that. I have in the past, and we will go through some of that today. But yes, the Sharia law most definitely overrules the Quran. Okay.
Excellent.
So, okay, let me share my screen and let me get started. And thanks for the support, guys. Thanks for being here. Please post your questions. I learn a lot from the questions as much as I do from the comments and the information I get. And if there are things you'd like us to explore in the future, do let us know. And again, I support you. I really appreciate the support I've had on the channel. Please subscribe. And yeah, thank you for that again. So let me get started. Has it popped up?
Yes.
Okay, today, this presentation is called Islam, Religion of Deceit. And what I will be talking about is a legal term in Islam called Hiyal. It's legalistic trickery. This is how Islamic scholars can legally deceive and legally break the law. And I don't know how that word got there. This was supposed to be Sharia law. It somehow became diarrhea law. It must be my spell checker. But diarrhea law was designed to be manipulated. It was designed to be altered for the advantage of Islam and for the advantage of the Muslims. Right, so now definitions matter. We have to understand what words mean because we are working with our Western definitions of words. We are working with definitions that we understand. However, we need to really start to work with the definitions of the Muslims, of Islam, and no longer work with our Western definitions. We have to understand from their perspective. So Abraham Lincoln said in 1864, "We all declare for liberty, but in using the same word, we do not all mean the same thing." This is very, very important. Now, we are being deceived many times because they use words that we are familiar with, but they don't mean them in the same way that we mean them. And we need to start unpacking this phenomenon and making sure that we are no longer deceived by this legal trick that they're pulling on us. Oh, good grief. Again, accident. How did this slide get in here? Islam fun fact, killing while praying. This is from the Sharia. It's chapter F7.0, and it's about placing a barrier in front of your prayer place. And it says it is recommended to put a barrier in front of oneself when performing the prayer. And it is then unlawful for anyone to pass between the person praying and the barrier, even when there is no other way to pass. And the person praying may push him back as hard as necessary. And were he to die as a result, one would not be subject to retaliation or have to pay an indemnity to his family. So what we learn from this is that under the diarrhea law in Islam, even prayer can come with the body count, a legal body count. Yeah, so that is from the Reliance of the Traveler, F7.1. This is the original version, the scanned version. You can see it's the very same command right here under F7 and F7.1, which talks about the barrier and the permission to kill someone who walks in front of you while you are praying, because this is a holy act. It is a holy act to murder someone who walks in front of you while you pray. I guess did you learn that in Sunday school, Thaddeus?
Sorry, what'd you say?
Did you learn about this in Sunday school?
Oh, no, I definitely did not.
Me neither. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, well, I guess we're behind the times here. So, and I want to just think about this for a moment. This is France. Is this provocation? Is this what they are looking for? That if someone decides to walk in front of them, this gives them license to riot. Just something to think about, ponder that. And I would love to see how Muslims are going to come and explain this to me. And here's my challenge to you who are going to be discussing with me. I'm not interested in the Quran. I'm not interested in the Hadith. You quote me from the Sharia, nothing else. Because the Sharia is the interpretation of the Sunnah and it is the interpretation of the Quran. So you show me what the scholarly rulings are, the final ultimate law within the Sharia. Because the Quran, you can argue literally any side of any argument from the Quran. So I'm not interested in. You show me the law or I'm not interested. All right. Islam is a religion of lawyers. And you really need to take note of this because Islam is a religion of law. The Sharia law, the Quran, is a very small book, 150,000 words. It is also an abrogated book. And as the scholars tell us, as I did in a different show, Muhammad made mistakes. So Allah had to send new verses to correct his errors. And this is what we call abrogation. And there are multiple forms of abrogation, and I will cover some ones that you're not aware of today. But all of this was incorporated into the Sharia, which is the exegesis of the Quran and the Sunnah. And Allah and Muhammad are defined in the Sharia as the lawgivers. They're both defined. They're synonymous as the givers of the law. And this makes Islam a religion of lawyers because we are constantly told we have to speak to a scholar, ask a scholar. What they're missing there, the word that they forget to put in there is that they need to speak with a legal scholar. We call them lawyers. So words matter. Words are critical and they are misleading us with misleading terms. So it's major scholars in Islam, they call them jurists. And a jurist is a person versed in the law as a judge, a lawyer, or a scholar. I don't know why they simply don't say judge, why they don't say lawyer. They chose the word scholar over these two. Very, very interesting. So let's have a look. These are just 5 references or 6 taken from the Sharia, from the Umdat al-Salik, or the Reliance of the Traveler, the world's most popular Sharia manual, the world's most common Sharia manual. The lawgiver, synonymous with Allah and his messenger. The lawgiver, the lawgiver, the lawgiver, the lawgiver, the lawgiver. They speak of the giver of the law, not the giver of morals, the giver of the law, right? And so note, and therefore the people who interpret the law are lawyers and judges, not priests. Any comment from you, that is?
Yeah, just a brief thought that in Christianity, this might be what we would call a Pharisee, someone who is obsessed with the technical details of the law and misses the main point. You know, in secular society, there is a certain benefit to legislating the laws exactly as written, even if there are loopholes in the law, well, then you write a better law. But when you're talking about morality, it seems a little backwards to be saying that you need a technical expert to understand morality.
Really good point. Notice that now, like this is one of my pet peeves, and I don't want to get into the subject right now, but Jesus had a lot to say about the Pharisees for their nitpicking about the law. This is exactly the same thing, except this is a million times worse. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So what the, oh, you figure that out. So we need to explain fiqh, what they call fiqh or fiqh. Islamic jurisprudence or Islamic law is the human understanding of the divine law, the sharia, as revealed in the Quran and the Sunnah, which are the teachings and the practices of Muhammad. Now, the sharia expanded upon and it developed, it was an exegesis of, by interpretation called ijtihad of the Quran and the Sunnah by Islamic jurists. We call them the ulama, the learned ones. Again, we call them the learned ones. Do they call them the learned ones? That's the question, because these are legal scholars, these are lawyers, and implemented by the rulings, the fatwa of jurists. So again, lawyers interpreting law. So fiqh deals with the observance of rituals, morals, and social legislation in Islam. So instead of, we have a separation of church and state. We have the law, we have morals, we have social rules, we have, these are all separated, and government and so on, and politics. In Islam, there is no separation of these things. They're all mashed somehow into one entity, one thing. I have no idea how they do this. I still don't understand it, but fiqh deals with the observance of rituals, morals. So the morals are legislated, and even how you behave in society is legislated as law. So Islam's greatest historian, Ibn Khaldun, describes fiqh as knowledge of the rules of Allah which concern the actions of persons who own themselves, meaning not slaves. And they are bound to obey the law, respecting what is required, wajib, what is sinful, haram, what is recommended. Haram also means illegal. What is recommended, mandub, what is disapproved, makruh, or what is neutral, mubah. This definition is consistent amongst the jurists, and again, lawyers, not priests, lawyers. Another definition of fiqh is knowledge of legislative rulings pertaining to the actions of man. And here they mean all actions, not religious, everything. And a master of this is called a mujtahid or jurist scholar. So very interesting. They use scholar and they drop jurist, right? And you can actually find a list of the top jurists on Wikipedia. Now, I know people say if it's on Wikipedia, it's wrong. So if I write an article about me on Wikipedia, is it immediately false? No. If the information is correct, then Wikipedia is correct. I'm smart enough to check Wikipedia and know if it's wrong, but it's just very convenient because there are many good articles actually on the subject on Wikipedia. There are some false ones, and I've identified those.
Before you go on, we have a couple comments from the audience. Billy Mandalay said their idea of law is about totalitarian control of the state. I think that's a pretty good summary.
That is very accurate, very accurate. We'll get to that, yes.
The Dashing Rogue has a super chat. This is actually the first ever super chat on my channel, since this is the first video where that was enabled. He says, keep up the good work, Lloyd. So thank you very much for that, Dashing Rogue. And then Born Again said, Muslims want to bring Sharia law into the UK.
Yes, they do. Everywhere. They are mandated to bring it to the world. So thanks, Dashing. Appreciate the support, man. Thank you. Yeah, so let's look at this quickly. This is in the Sharia section C 2.0 from the Reliance of the Traveler. The obligatory, the fard, is that which the lawgiver strictly requires to be done. A person who refrains from it without excuse deserves to be punished. Obligatory and fard, so there's no difference between obligatory and requisite wajib. So obligatory and requisite, or fard and wajib, are the same things. And we can see that here, what is required, wajib. So different words get used, different translators use different words, and occasionally, well, actually very often, they will mistranslate these things deliberately to try to hide things. So you got to be very careful about that. You need multiple sources. You need to be aware of how they deceive, and we'll talk about that as we go. I want to just mention Ibn Khaldun. He wrote the Muqaddimah. He's considered the greatest historian in Islam, and he's considered the founder, the creator of sociology. And he was very highly educated as a Muslim jurist. He was certified as a Muslim imam. Essentially, he was certified in Islamic law and the sciences. So this man, and no, he did not get his qualification from the YouTube comment section. He actually learned under a highly skilled jurist at his school, right? So I want to show you this. He speaks of obligation. So where you see the word obligation, they're talking about a legal obligation. And he says so here, it is known that the legal obligation to emigrate served the purposes of aiding and guarding the Prophet. Legal obligation. The term obligation in Islam means it's a legal term. It's a legal obligation. And also, emigration is a legal obligation in Islam. The obligations which the Prophet had imposed, now he's talking about religious leaders of Jews and Christians in the Muqaddimah. And this is his most famous work. And they say here that in accordance with the aforementioned, the obligations, there's a need for political leadership in social organization. So Islam is a political religion. And the human species must have a person who will cause people to act in accordance with what is good for them, because they're doing this because it is good for you, and will prevent them by force from doing things harmful. In the Muslim community, the holy war is a religious duty because of the universalism of the Muslim mission and the obligation, the legal obligation to convert everybody to Islam, either by persuasion or by force. Therefore, caliphate and royal authority are united in Islam so that the person in charge can devote the available strength to both of them at the same time. The other religious groups, Jews and Christians, did not have a universal mission, and the holy war was not a religious duty to them, save only for the purposes of defense. Clearly, this man is an Islamophobe, doesn't know Islam. He has no idea it's a religion of peace. What the hell's wrong with him? Islam's greatest scholar, Islam's acknowledged greatest historian, is an Islamophobe. Good grief. What next? You know?
So we have a comment here from Archive.
Right.
Not directly related, but I think it's a good comment. He says, greetings from the Netherlands. Thanks to our unlimited hospitality. Meanwhile, one of Allah's favorite slums.
Yeah.
It's bye-bye Dutch culture and freedom of speech. And I just want to highlight this because it brings out the idea that there are real implications here. We're not just having a scholarly debate necessarily. There's real world implications to what Islam wants to do.
Yeah. So and this is the driving force. The Sharia is the driving force behind all of it. It defines and explains all of this. So Islam is the true biblical religion, legit. So Quran 42:13, He hath ordained for you, and this you speak, Allah is talking to Muhammad. And ordained is a legal term. Look it up in the dictionary, it's a legal term. He hath ordained for you that religion which he commanded unto Noah, or commended unto Noah, which we inspire in thee, Muhammad, and which we commended unto Abraham and Moses and Jesus, saying, establish the religion. So that's why Muslims say that we have altered our books, because all of these people, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Noah, were all Muslims. They came to fulfill the Sharia, and we edited our books to hide all of that, and we hid the Quran, and Muhammad was the first person to faithfully implement Allah's will, and everyone else, their stories were edited or they defied. But because Islam, in the Sharia, you're not allowed, it's illegal under the Sharia to criticize the prophets. They cannot say the prophets went astray. They have to say that the Christians edited the Bible to hide all of this.
Makes sense.
So Sharia, now we get told Sharia means path to water, and the professional term for that is crap. Because, I'm sorry, there's like, just like take the word light. The word light can mean to light a fire, right? It can mean a light, which means like a bright light. It can mean something that's not heavy. Words can have multiple meanings. And for some reason, the Muslims always choose the one most irrelevant, useless, non-descriptive, pointless, deceptive meaning. They skip all the first ones and go to the last one, right? Sharia means a prophetic religion in its totality, right? This is from the Encyclopedia of Islam by the best scholars in the world. To buy a copy of this book will cost you $36,500. I'm not kidding. Sharia designates the rules and regulations governing the lives of Muslims. It is closely associated with fiqh, Islamic law, which signifies academic discussion of divine law, right? It has a wide range of secular usage. And notice here, they speak of Sharia in the Quran and the Hadith because the Hadith are considered law. Those are rulings in law. They also speak of Sharia in Jewish and Christian literature, which is why you see in the comments, they always go, you don't follow your law. The Jews didn't follow the law. The Christians aren't following the law. Because as far as they're concerned in the Sharia, they are told that Christianity is a religion of law, which it is not. Islam's a religion of law, right? Whereas Christianity really leans towards being a personal relationship with God, and that law is not secular law. So correct, Thaddeus?
Yes, that's correct.
Right.
Christianity doesn't really have any desire to set secular laws. Jesus was asked about this question indirectly when someone brought him a coin and they asked, who should we pay taxes to? Should we pay them to the temple or should we pay them to the Roman government? And Jesus says, show me the coin whose image is on it. Caesar's image is on it. He says, well, then give it to Caesar. It's Caesar's property. So it's kind of an indirect way of saying, and there are direct passages too, of course, but in the letters of Paul saying to obey the laws of the government. But basically, Christianity isn't interested in legislating morality. You can't make someone moral. You can make them you can make them do certain things, right? You can set the penalty high enough that will prevent most people from doing something, but you can't change their heart through law. So
No.
Christianity is not really interested in setting laws in that sense.
Yeah. Now, Sharia occurs, okay, just question. Allah's word cannot be corrupted, yet they claim it is corrupted by Christians. I know, you worked that out. And then someone says 36.5K. Yes, that's exactly. I'll show you soon. So Sharia occurs in the Quran. We have set you on a Sharia of command, so follow it. This is where the term path comes from, a designated path. It's not a path to water. It's a path you must follow, a way to go. And he has laid down for you as religion that which he appointed also for Noah. So this is, in terms of the Sharia, this is why this is now part of their belief that we have corrupted Islam and Christians are deviant Muslims. That's why we are infidels. So this ultimately made its way into the Sharia. That understanding is part of the Sharia. And so let's look at a few additional Islamic methods of deceit. This is not a complete list. There are a few more. But let's look at taqiyya, which is actually both Shia and Sunni. Don't believe the story when I tell you that's Shia only. It is calculated deceit. And this is quoted from Ibn Taymiyyah, one of the 24 major scholars of Islam, called the Sheikh al-Islam. The main scholar after Muhammad is Al-Ghazali, the number one guy. And then below him are these Sheikh al-Islam. Ibn Taymiyyah said, taqiyya is calculated deceit to promote Islam. Then you have muda'rat. And this is where, if you look up the term, this phrase, do not let your enemy know he's your enemy. That is how that is interpreted. I learned that from a guy who I believe, I'm not sure, was a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. And he said this, or they said this in my presence, and they didn't realize that I was listening. And that's why I picked this up. If you look on Google, you'll find I'm the only person for the last 12 months to have actually made this statement online. They are very good at keeping secrets. But muda'rat is hating people in your heart, but not letting them know your true feelings. And they term it, the term that they use is, do not let your enemy know he's your enemy. Remember that. Kitman is deceit by silence or omission. It's a deceitful half-truth, lying by omission. For example, Muslim apologists will often quote a fragment of verse 532 in the Quran: if anyone kills, it shall be as if he had killed all mankind, neglecting to mention that the rest of the verse and the next verse mandate murder, mutilation, and torture in undefined cases of corruption or fitna and mischief. And fitna is temptation, to tempt someone away from Islam. So when they say corruption, they mean changing someone's spirit, changing his heart, corrupting him from Islam, not necessarily that you went and shot them in the head, but merely that you were luring them away from Islam towards, say, Christianity. And then tawriya is deceit by ambiguity. This is where, for instance, someone knocks on the door and says, is your mom here? And the mom doesn't want to speak with this person. And the child says, no, my mother is not here. Meaning my mother is not here between you and me. So there's a half a meter gap between the two of us, and meaning my mother is not here, meaning she's not standing between us. That is tawriya, very commonly used. Kitman, tawriya, and darura are the most common forms of deceit used by individual Muslims. Darura is deceit through necessity, to engage in something that is haram or forbidden or illegal, because this way you can either gain the trust of the enemy or you can take away suspicion from you. All right. So let's have a look. Quran 533 is actually taken from Talmud Sanhedrin. And this is another very interesting discussion to look at the sources of the Quran. The sources of the Quran are largely from the Talmud and from Gnostic, heretical Christian writings that were regarded as heretical even 2,000 years ago. And then you have some from Zoroastrianism, Sabaeanism, and so on. But let's have a look at this Quran 533. Therefore, Adam, the first man, was created alone to teach you that with regard to anyone who destroys one soul from the Jewish people, if he kills one Jew, the verse describes him blame as if he had destroyed an entire world, not the entire world. As Adam was one person from whom the population of an entire world came forth. And conversely, anyone who sustains one soul from the Jewish people, the verse describes him credit as if he sustained an entire world. So to kill one man means that you kill his entire lineage, all of his descendants, and that could be an entire world of people. So that is from the Talmud Sanhedrin 37a. And let's look at what the Quran does. The Quran steals this and corrupts it. For that cause, we decreed for the children of Israel, and they never mention that this was decreed for the children of Israel. They just say, but the Quran says whoever kills a man, has killed the whole world. And whoever said, no, it says we decreed for the children of Israel, for the Jews, and they drop that. That is very dishonest, and they do it all the time. Whosoever killeth a human being for other than manslaughter or corruption in the earth, it shall be as if he had killed all mankind. And whoso saveth the life of one, it shall be as if he had saved the life of all mankind. The only reward of those who make war upon Allah and his messenger and strive after corruption in the land will be that they will be killed or crucified or have their hands and feet on alternate sides cut off. They somehow forget to put that part in. And we can see this if we go to safari.org. This is the original, and you can see this here: the loss and the blood of his brother's offspring. That's what they refer to in this. The Talmud is a commentary on the Bible. I know people have the most peculiar, most false ideas of what the Talmud is, and I spent 3.5 months reading this thing for a few shows, and it's references to Genesis 4:10. So it's really just a commentary on the Bible and on the Torah. Comments from you before I move on?
Yeah, this is like one of the top 5 most favorite verses of Western Muslims to quote, because they, if you only quote that one portion of it, it may feel like it forbids jihad, forbids killing in the name of Allah or whatever. But ironically, in context, it's kind of saying the exact opposite. He's saying in verse 32, it's like, this is what the law I gave for the Jewish people, but then verse 33, but for you, and
Muslim.
then it goes on to describe the conditions where you're allowed to kill someone.
Yeah, because 533 is for the Muslims. The Jews should be nice, but the Muslims should murder people and crucify them and cut off their hands and feet on opposite sides. That is called a crime against humanity, and that is illegal under international law today, but it's not in Islam.
And our good friend Sayed F11 is back. He says that he's going to stay on subject. We will see. But he already has broken that by saying Jesus came to apply this law, not destroy or abolish it. And that's funny because that's going to be talked about later in this presentation. So make sure to stay tuned, Sayed, when I talk about that exact verse of the
Sayed,
Bible.
when you, please quote us from the Sharia when you do discuss Islam. I'd like to see you talk about the Sharia. I am not interested in the Quran. I have zero interest in the Sunnah. So moving on. So now there is one more form of deceit, and this is one that people have never heard of. This is one. Now, I learned about this some time ago, and it takes me a long time to read through these books. And as you know, I read through these books because so that you don't have to. And believe me, they give me headaches. Good grief. So it's taken me a long time to learn about this and understand how it's applied, and then to write these presentations to simplify it to the point where I can make a presentation on it. Hiyal. We're going to talk about Hiyal. Hiyal is legalistic trickery. It is legal trickery in Islamic jurisprudence. And taqiyya is a distraction away from Hiyal. They want you talking about irrelevancies like taqiyya because what they are hiding is Hiyal. Hiyal is defined as a contortion, something twisted as in position or twisted in meaning, contrivance, a plan or a scheme, an expedient. An expedient is defined as conducive to advantage, always to their advantage or to their interest, as opposed to doing the right thing, as opposed to morally right. Device, a plan or a scheme for effecting a purpose, a crafty scheme, a trick. And subterfuge, an artifice or expedient used to evade a rule or escape a consequence or to hide something. This is how Hiyal is defined, right? Let us step forward a little bit. So now, this is how they lie to you. This is Hiyal. I'm going to use for a moment Wikipedia, and this is actually accurate, right? And so Hiyal, singular, hila, contortion, contrivance, device, or subterfuge, is legalistic trickery in Islamic law. The purpose of Hiyal is to avoid straightforward observance of Islamic law in difficult situations while still obeying the letter of the law. An example is the practice of dual purchase. In other words, to avoid the prohibition of usury by making two contracts of purchase and repurchase at a higher price, similar to a modern futures contract. Because in Islam, usury is prohibited, except usury happens every single day because Hiyal is how the scholars, the legal scholars in Islam, the leaders of Islam, get around the law. Every single law has a Hiyal method of getting around and breaking that law. So a special subfield is oath-trickery, dedicated to the formulation of ambiguous statements designed to be interpreted as an oath or a promise while leaving open loopholes. So they have a special method of making promises, and I will discuss this again, we'll come back to this, while making sure they can break that promise legally. And a substantial literature on such tricks has developed. There's the Kitab al-Maharaji fi Hiyal, the book of evasion and trickery. And this was, the author who wrote it died in 805. So they've been doing this for what, 1200 years? And a more comprehensive treatment is the Kitab al-Hiyal wa al-Maharij. So for 1200 years, they have been finding ways of making the law and then breaking those very same laws. Now, a pet peeve of mine, dear Lloyd, Jews are dishonest, but it's fine when Muslims lie. No criticism from us for this, hail Islam. But the Jews do usury. Usury is evil. Jews are evil because Jews do usury. Well, but usury by deceit is fine when Muslims do it. Hail Muhammad. We're not hypocrites. We're not shameless liars. We're Christians. True story, Lord. True story. Yours in Christ. The comments section. I see this every day. You know, Muslims are pure as the driven snow because they don't do usury, but the Jews are evil because they do usury. But the 1.5 billion Muslims who actually do usury every single day because they found a way to break the law to do it, to lie and use legal deceit to do it, that's okay. No, that's just fine. Don't be a bigot. You know, but a handful of Jews do it. I'm like, oh my God, this is evil. We need to bomb them. Understand? So seriously, either the people telling you this, these Christians telling you this, are liars, or they're themselves deceived and they are spreading lies based on them being deceived and ignorant. So this is something I'm going to come after those people. Believe me, I'm coming for them as well, because I'm going to go through every one of their lies and I'm going to be talking about it, and I'll be looking for you. I'll be coming for you. Sorry, your comments, Dad.
No, I don't have much to add to that. You know, it's very interesting that this is built into Islam, that, you know, lawyers in the United States often get made fun of, often get criticized because of they have a reputation for looking for loopholes to get guilty people off and such.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's exactly what Islam encourages. And it's just bizarre to me that you can take something like paying interest on a loan. It's forbidden in Islam, right? So let's give it a different name and set up a legal contract that has the exact same amount of interest, but we don't call it interest. We call it fees, or we call it a purchase contract or whatever. And suddenly it's
Yep.
legal. And
Yep.
this is just the
Yeah.
exact opposite of the way I understand morality.
I know there's another way that they do it that I learned when I was living in Dubai. For instance, they add the interest up front, right? So let's say you take out $10,000 and with the interest over, let's say a 5-year term or whatever, to make up random numbers, it's $12,000. So what happens is you sign for a loan of $12,000. You don't sign for a loan of 10,000. And then when you make your first payment, they charge you $2,000 up front, which is the interest which they take on the first payment. And then you pay off the $10,000 over your 5-year period. That's how they do it. And Syed is making a noise here. But Syed, I'm reading from your scholars. I'm reading out of your books. I suggest you go have a sit down with Mr. Muhammad, Mr. Allah, and all of your top scholars, and you ask them why they wrote this, because I'm just reading it. Right, moving on.
Well, just quickly before you move on, I do want to say that Syed, either get on subject or I'm going to block you. It's that simple. I don't have
Yeah,
time for you to keep trolling us.
yeah, this is not relevant, Syed. Speak about this. Quote us from your own books, from your major books. I'm not interested in some random book or some random scholar that is irrelevant. So, from the Encyclopedia of Islam, the legal devices which form an integral part of Islamic law in practice can be described as the use of legal means for extra legal ends. Extra legal means illegal, right? Extra legal means it's a legal term. Again, that could not be achieved directly with the means provided by the Sharia. So they want to use legal means for illegal ends that could not be achieved within the laws provided by the Sharia, so that they could act against the provisions of the sacred law to arrive at the desired result while conforming to the letter of the law. For instance, the Quran prohibits interest, while at the same time there was an imperative demand for the giving and taking of interest in commercial life by the merchants, So there are many variants of this, right? So for instance, this amounts to a loan. So one of the ways is this amounts to a loan with the slave as security, and the difference between the two prices represents the interest. Look, it's on the screen. Read it on your own time later. I'm not going to go read through the entire thing. But so, okay, let me read this. The prospective debtor sells to the prospective creditor a slave for cash and immediately buys the slave back from him for a greater amount payable at a future date. This amounts to a loan with the slave as security, and the difference between the two prices is the interest. Traders also acted as moneylenders. This custom prevailed in Medina as early as the time of Malik in the year 795. Now, if Muhammad died in 732, within 63 years of his death, they were doing this. And note, there were hundreds of these devices, hundreds, many concerned with highly technical points, but all with a scrupulous regard for the letter of the law. So extra legal means illegal, forbidden by law. So these are ways to circumvent the law.
And you got all this off of a Christian missionary website, right? I mean, this couldn't possibly.
This was it. This was with Tommy Robinson. He wrote this. I mean, I got it from Tommy Robinson. He wrote this for me, and I didn't use any scholarly legal text. I didn't use any Islamic text, nor did I use the absolute best academic works in the world from the best scholars, many of them Muslims themselves. No, I didn't do any of that at all.
Yeah, I mean,
some of it I made up last night while I was sleeping. I kind of just started, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what is this Encyclopedia of Islam? That's obviously a Christian apologetic resource. I mean, Gotcha.
Clearly. Um, so the first and the simplest Hiyal were presumably thought out by parties who felt the need for them. In other words, mainly the merchants. Merchants. People blame Jews about being merchants, but hold on, well, what is this about Muslims? Merchants? But merchants in particular. But it was quite beyond the merchants to invent and apply the more complicated Hiyal. They had to have recourse to specialists in religious law, and these last did not hesitate to supply the need.
It's just such a weird system. It's like, we got a legal problem. Where are we going to go? I know. Let's go to our religious leader. They're the ones
Yeah,
who can tell us what to do.
yeah, the religious leaders can teach us how to lie and break the law. Excellent. Let's go to my priest and ask him, I want to shag my neighbor. I want to cheat on my wife. How do I do this? Well, Ahmed, well, Abdul, let me show you a way. Like, what is that? Like, what is that? Seriously. Good grief. Yeah, I know, it drives me nuts. So yeah, let me just continue here. As you can see here, this is the pricing for the Encyclopedia of Islam, and it is 32,183 euros to buy it, and it is $36,592 if you'd like to buy a copy. You can rent it for $3,876 a year, plus $1,214 a year as an annual update fee. So for $5,000 a year, you can rent this book.
What a deal.
Dude, guys, let's donate a little bit of money. We'll get this. I can really use this thing. But yeah, so for just a handful of money, you can get this too. Syed, get yourself a copy, dude. Start reading.
And we do have Muhammad Amin in the chat now. Since I assume he just arrived, I'm going to just briefly give him the same warning I gave at the start, that we are talking about Sharia law today. We're not interested in any other subject. So if you want to dispute anything we are saying,
Yeah,
you need to cite a Sharia source. We don't care about the Quran today. We don't care about Hadith today. And we certainly do not care about what you think about the Bible, because that is not today's subject.
Yeah, quotas from the Sharia. That's all I want. Extra legal means illegal, forbidden by law. I just basically took entries out of 4 or 5 different dictionaries and just put them on the page here. Not regulated or sanctioned by law, not permitted by law, outside the scope of the law, beyond the province or authority of the law, outlawed, illegal, banned, prohibited. Hopefully that clarifies the position of what extra legal means. Right. So let's have a look. Hiyal, plural of hila, artifice, device, an expedient, a stratagem, a means of evading a thing. The word has several technical meanings, but hiyal is a technical term for stratagems in war. Now, what is interesting is that we just saw another example of kitman. How did Wikipedia miss that? That hiyal is a form of warfare. Odd that Wikipedia had the other definition, but not this one. Just sheer coincidence, I'm sure. Not deliberate at all. Not deliberate at all. Not a common strategy that we see all the time. Just a sheer accident. I'm sure that if I went and typed this in there, it would disappear tomorrow. So there are synonyms, maqaid and adab. So notice that the same thing might be under different names in different places. The use of stratagems in war is justified by a saying attributed to the Prophet Muhammad. And it's actually hadith. It's not an old proverb, it's a hadith. And it says, war is deceit. The term occurs in the titles of works on military art as well as in the text of military art. And the earliest of these works known to us is the Kitab al-Hiyal. So it is also a form of warfare. In other words, propaganda warfare, psychological warfare, deception in warfare. And I will get to that in a moment, why this annoys me. So let's look at Sahih Bukhari in the book of jihad. Now, as we know, jihad means self-improvement. But of course, in this book, I read through this chapter, these hundreds of hadiths from Bukhari, and there's not a single discussion on self-improvement. What you do see is a lot of murder, killing, and warfare and rape. But as far as self-improvement, didn't find it. So, but notice it says here, the Prophet said that war is deceit. And that is authentic. That is sahih. That is authentic. And you can see all the references, the different references for this within Bukhari. Now the comments section, and that's you, Syed, and Muhammad Amin, and the other dishonest commenters. The encyclopedias from Orientalists, not Muslims. Yeah, sure, dude. But how about you go to the encyclopedia and look at the list of contributors and tell me. So you clearly haven't read it. You know, if you haven't read something but have a judgment without having evidence, that's called being bigoted. You're being bigoted right now. So go away, you know, and come back smarter, which you're never going to do. But the comments section, right? I just referred to the comment section a moment ago, is always keen to tell us, but Mossad said that by way of deception, you will do war. But it's okay for Muslims to do it for 1400 years already, bigot. So what's interesting is that have you seen these Islamic pro-Islam atheists and pro-Islam Christians ever criticize Islam? Because I haven't. Somehow they will always find a way to smear the Jews, but when the very same thing is true of and can be undoubtedly proven with overwhelming evidence that the Muslims are guilty of it, and I can very much prove that the Jews are not guilty of it, they will immediately start, I don't know, but hey, they're happy to blame the Jews and lie for the Muslims and give them a free pass. It's okay if Muslims do it. I find that kind of hypocrisy is incredible. Your thoughts, Radif?
Well, just first of all, I did have to go ahead and block Sayed. Sorry,
Sure.
but he continued to bring up totally irrelevant things. He was trying to talk about the Catholic Church and the priest abuse scandal, which is not remotely on subject. So he is been blocked for the next 5 minutes. Sorry about that, but you know, we did warn you several times. So there you go. You got what you wanted.
Yeah.
As far as being on subject here, so yeah, I mean, Muhammad himself said that war is deceit. So how can you say that Muslims aren't allowed to deceive? If Muhammad says it, then it must be true.
Yep.
And of course, we know that in Islam, war doesn't just mean armed conflict.
Correct.
Everyday life is war.
Correct. And in this case, Hiyal is deceit for the purposes of warfare. Right. So, yeah. But anyway, as I said, it's okay when Muslims do it. So let's look at this. 9-year-old Aisha, lawful for me. Aisha. So in Islam, there's no concept that we have in Christianity of right and wrong. There is only legal. And notice it says here, the Prophet asked Abu Bakr for Aisha's hand in marriage. Abu Bakr said, but I am your brother. As in, he didn't want to do this. And the Prophet said, you are my brother in Allah's religion and his book, but Aisha is lawful for me to marry. He didn't say it is right. He said it is legal. So the law is often not about right and wrong. The law is about what is legal. So make a note. This is not a moral judgment. This is a legal judgment. This is a lawyer's judgment, right? So let's talk about that. So no right, no wrong, just legal and illegal. So the hadith there explicitly defines Muhammad wanting to marry Aisha as lawful, not as right, not as wrong, as legal. So the implications of this are as follows. There is no absolute morality in Islam. There is no ultimate source of right and wrong. God is a God of a certain nature. He cannot lie. But in Islam, there is no God of one nature because anything and everything in Islam is made legal by changing the law, or you can use hiyal to reinterpret the law. Hence, they use the phrase, it's how it's interpreted. They often use that phrase, well, it's how it's interpreted, yes. Meaning they can reinterpret the law to alter it for their advantage. So interpret is to construe or to understand in a particular way, and to construe is to deduce by inference or interpretation. So they can reinterpret anything to change the law in their favor.
We have a comment here from Amin. He says, he says this is from a Sharia source. He didn't specify the source, but he says, quote, the scholars are agreed it is permissible to deceive the enemy at war in any way possible, except if that would mean breaking the terms of a treaty or trust, in which case it is not permitted.
Fortunately, we're going to get to that where they show how they are allowed to break treaties and trusts. That is really interesting. Thanks for pointing that out. Because yes, in Islam, they've already worked out in the year 805 how they can break any and all treaties. And in fact, all treaties were broken with Quran 9:5. But we'll get to that. Thanks for lying. Caught you lying. You're a liar. Right, moving on. So, a religion of deceit, legal deceit. Advantage is gained through legal trickery. This is because Islam doesn't deal in right and wrong. It deals in haram and halal, legal and illegal. And notice its polemics and its rhetoric are written by jurists, by lawyers. So understand all of these arguments, things, the dumb things that Syed says, the dumb things that Muhammad Amin says, these arguments ultimately derive from legal scholars, from lawyers. So they are able, therefore they will argue. Think of the court dramas you've seen. Think of the way lawyers operate. They will operate on little details, shift the blame, change the subject, move the goalpost, do whatever they have to do, harp on a tiny little irrelevant point, anything and everything to try to get off the main topic, to get their client to win. It is dishonest lawfare. So notice that Islam doesn't deal in morality, it deals in law. Perspective will change things. And we are not seeing their perspective. And not Muhammad Amin's perspective, because he's as irrelevant. He's as absolutely irrelevant. We're talking about the people who run Islam, the ulama. And these people are very powerful and very, very wealthy. They are backed by incredible amounts of money, and they have the influence over 1 billion people. It is their perspective that we have to understand. And we've been blind to their methods because we're using our definitions and not theirs.
Briefly, there's a bit of debate in the chat as to whether or not most Muslims are liars or not. I think that both people are probably making a good point here. It depends on how we're defining Muslims. If we're saying most Muslims who are participating in online chats, then I would say yes, most are definitely lying. Most know exactly what they're doing. If you're just talking about Muslims in general, well, no, I mean, the vast majority of the Muslim public doesn't know these things that we're talking about. The vast majority are as ignorant as the average Christian is. These things are hidden. They are only suitable for the learned people to know, and the small percentage of the population that is directly involved with propagating Islam. For the other, 98% or whatever, most of them probably don't know about this. So I would say you're both right in an aspect.
Well, the entire, think about this. It's like imagine you have a fish swimming in water that's polluted. The water that they swim in, the culture, the whole system of thought has this as a foundation. So in essence, they will be immersing it without even realizing that they are. So there's going to be an element of this within them. I mean, that's a discussion I could talk about. It's really not, it's not what I'm planning to talk about today, because a lot of their thinking is based on some of the Platonic mysticism as well as its rhetoric. You look at the sophists. If you look at Aristotle was the man who ultimately created logic, and he's the greatest. He was known as the philosopher. And he was the guy who gave a very hard time to the sophists who were teaching people for good money how to lie, because they were teaching how to convince and how to lie, how to never be wrong. And notice the Muslims in the comments can never be wrong, no matter what. They can always just dodge around and dance around the point. And the sophists were the ones that they learned that from, and they incorporated sophistry into their writings. And they use sophistry. They don't use actual, what you call unitary logic, and the logic of non-self-contradiction, of non-contradiction. So Islam deals in law, not morality. It is not wrong for them to lie. If it gives them advantage, it is right. It's that simple. So let's look at the sacred law. So it's called sacred law for a reason. So let's look at law. So it is everything. Sacred law is everything, right? Everything in Islam is defined by the sacred law. It's written about in the sacred law. There used to be thousands of Sharia manuals, but eventually a handful of those became the main manuals, right? And in fact, the Sharia is the equivalent of the Jewish Talmud. It is the Islamic Talmud. The Sharia is the Islamic Talmud. And the Quran is really just the Cliff's Notes of the Sharia. Actually, Thaddeus, you gave a point earlier where you spoke about a guy being hit by a car versus being hit by a bus, and it's not a car. Can you just give us that example, please? Actually, that was a really useful one.
Yeah, so most cities have laws against jaywalking. That just running out on the street. If you run out and you're not at a crosswalk, you're not at a red light, a stop sign, whatever, and you get hit by a car, uh, it's your fault rather than the driver's fault. So this is kind of akin to a lawyer saying, "Well, the law said if you get hit by a car, it's not the driver's fault, but you were hit by a bus, so that's completely different. The law doesn't cover that, so it's still the bus driver's fault."
Right. So these are little technical notes they use to circumvent and violate the law. So yeah. So think about it. The Quran is like a blueprint to building a city or a house or a building. You cannot live in the blueprint. The blueprint is not detailed enough to live in, but you can use it to build a city. So the Quran is the blueprint, the Sharia is the city, right? And it's really just the Cliff's Notes, because also don't forget the Quran's abrogated. And after abrogation, the Quran is 12 pages long. There's almost nothing in it. So now law has rules of interpretation, and even English law, which became effectively international law, is interpreted, right? We have the literal rule, the plain meaning. We have the mischief rule and the golden rule, and you can see those here, right? It's just the literal reading of the statute, but there's the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And by the same token, so the plain rule is one of the three rules of statutory construction applied by English courts. The other two are the mischief rule and the golden rule. So literal is just the plain meaning. Then there's the spirit of the law and so on. All right. And by the same token, because Islam's a legal system, it also has levels of interpretation of the law. So here's another one of my pet peeves, because this is something I'm coming for. I'm coming for these people because, man, they annoy me. But the evil Jews have pardes. So Jewish exegesis is called pardes, okay, in rabbinic Judaism. And pardes is an acronym from Peshat, Remez, Derash, and Sod. And you'll listen, I have listened to people on YouTube talking about on the Sod level, the secret, where they lie to you because there's a secret level that you don't, oh God, please just stop. So Peshat means surface, straight or literal, the direct meaning, because Judaism is also a religion of law. Remez is the hints or the allegorical or hidden or symbolic meaning. There's derash, to inquire or to seek, right? And there's the secret or mystery level, right? The esoteric level, which is given through inspiration or revelation, the sod. Each type of party's interpretation examines the extended meaning of a text to derive more meaning from it. Except in the pardes is not a secret. It's not hidden. It's not something that they've made a big secret that no one is supposed to know. It's an open secret. Everyone knows it. They get taught this. If you go to a yeshiva as just a regular Jew, you will learn this, and they will teach you, well, this is how you got to think about the text. So it's common knowledge. It is not a hidden secret that no one is supposed to know, right? But let's have a look at the very same thing, because it's always okay when Muslims do the same thing. Don't be a bigot. How can you blame the Muslims? It's only the Jews you can blame. So Islam has 4 levels of meaning, except this is something that is known only to their major scholars. And the people who are pushing the Jewish angle somehow don't know this. I don't know why. So let's have a look, right? So let's look at the Sharia. This actually, I can pull this right out of the Sharia as well. So there are 4 levels of meaning in the Quran. First is the ibara, which is the meaning of the text meant for the mass of believers. So Islam is a level of meaning in text which is meant for the masses. Second is the ishara, only available to the spiritual elite. That's the ulama. And it lies beyond the obvious verbal meaning. The third is the lataif, which is subtleties in the text that were meant for the saints. That would be the Sufi. And we'll get into that another day. And finally, the haqaiq, which he said were only comprehensible to the prophets. Let's have a look. But that's fine. That's the one definition. And this falls under the heading of tawil, which is the allegorical interpretation of the Quran, or the quest for its hidden inner meanings. So the word tawil and tafsir have been translated to mean explanation, elucidation, interpretation, or commentary. But from the end of the 8th century onwards, tawil was commonly regarded as the esoteric or mystical interpretation of the Quran, while the conventional exegesis was called tafsir. Now, we're all familiar with the tafsir, like Tafsir Ibn Kathir, Tafsir Ibn Abbas, and so on, Tafsir al-Jalalain. These are the scholars who interpret the Quran, and they interpret each verse, verse by verse, line by line, and they explain them to you. And we all know about the first tafsir, right? The interpretation. But why have we never been told about tawil? That is never, it is a secret. It's a secret. Why is this not discussed? Why is this not given to us in detail and said, okay, by the way, we do the same thing the Jews do, but you know what? Vilify the Jews over it and give us a pass, because when we lie the same way, supposedly as the Jews do, then it's okay when we lie, it's okay when we cheat, but it's not a, you know. So ibara is a clear, unambiguous expression of speech, as opposed to ishara, mystical illusion, often ambiguous in order to conceal its true meaning from the uninitiated. Syed and Muhammad Amin, you guys are the uninitiated. You don't get the ishara level, just by the way. Then we have the subtlest meanings, the lataif. God has honored the elect, the asfiya, among his servants by granting them the understanding of his subtle secrets and his lights, so that they can see the secret allusions and the hidden signs contained in the Quran. You guys don't get that. Sorry, guys. You guys aren't the initiated. And then, of course, we have grasping the realities, or the haqaiq. In this case, they call it the divine realities, because this is mysticism, and this is the Islamic form of gnosis, or the Gnosticism. What few people realize is that, and I will have to discuss this in the future, this is not a discussion for today, but Islam is a Gnostic religion. It is Gnosticism. It is Gnosticism turned up to 11. And when they talk of divine realities, they mean that the only reality is internal and the external must be rejected. But that is really a lengthy discussion for another day. Okay, moving on. So let's look at, again, from the Sharia. This is from the Umdat al-Salik. They speak of it can be interpreted in other than its apparent sense. So things can be interpreted in more than just the literal, in the way that of the literal words on the page, right? And they speak of the lawgiver, again, the law. And here we find scope for differences of opinion, but also the number of meanings that a text can imply. So a text can imply more meanings than the average Muslim. That's Muhammad Amin and Syed. Those are you two guys. So you guys are at the basic level. You guys are like the little minions. And we're talking about the scholars. So seriously, why don't you guys go play in traffic, and we'll talk about adult stuff here. So the number of meanings that a text can imply. So any text, any line in the Quran can imply multiple different things. And also you can then see how much interpretation it will bear. And this is from the Sharia. So now let's talk about the mantuk and the mafhum, two very little, completely unknown aspects of abrogation. You will not find this in any Western text discussing abrogation. And I'm sure that's just a sheer accident. So the mantuk of a verse is the apparent meaning that can be understood directly from the word. So for instance, go and open the door. That just means get up, walk to the door, reach out your hand, turn the handle, open the door. That is the literal meaning. That is the mantuk of the words. Go and open the door. However, right, they speak of, there's the mafhum of a verse. And this is an understanding of the verse that is not explicit in the words of the sentence, an allegorical meaning, a hidden meaning, a mystical meaning that lies above. And this is only taught to the people that are not the masses like Amin and Syed, but taught to the ulama and taught to those higher levels, the jurists of the higher levels. That's what they understand. So when you see, for argument's sake, go and open the door, what they might read is, take your mushrooms, go into an altered state, spin around like a dervish, and then enter the hidden secret realm where you enter into communion with Allah, and you see his bright light, and you go through the veil, and you touch his heart, and his essence fill you get me. That's what they mean, right? And I'm not exaggerating. I'm actually not exaggerating. I will get there one day. It's insane. You read through the Sharia, it is insane. It's nuts. But anyway, excuse my so there are go on.
Yeah, I think that's good. Since you already had a pause here, Muhammad Amin says that he is going to deal with this material on Thursday because he has other things to do, and they said goodbye. So Amin, if you watch this on the replay, or you're still watching and just pretended to sign off, or haven't signed off quite yet, either way, when you do come on Thursday, make sure you bring valid sources, or your comments will just be ignored.
Deleted, please, just delete them, because just it's a waste of time. It's a waste of my time. Yeah, but these are things that I will have to go through at length in the future. But this passage here, these passages here, you guys might know the Islamic apologist called Yasir Qadhi. He's a very famous, he's the number 3 guy. After Shabir Ali and Zakir Naik, Yasir Qadhi is the other major Islamic apologist today. And he wrote this. This is what he wrote in his book. Let's continue. He wrote this, in his book is called An Introduction to the Sciences of the Quran. I can give you guys a copy. I can link it in the description later, Thaddeus. People can download it and read it for themselves. Don't have to take my word for it. Lastly, this phrase also implies that the understanding of a verse, the mafhum, can be abrogated, right? Although the explicit wording, the mantuk, remains applicable. So in other words, go and open the door. If the Quran says go and open the door, that's the mantuk, but it's been abrogated, right? The understanding that you would normally derive has been abrogated, and there's a new understanding, but you don't know it because you're not one of the ulama, you're not one of the leaders. So you're the regular Joe, and you just think, okay, go open the door. But understanding of the verse, so that can be abrogated, and there's a new understanding which the scholars have not told you because you're not one of them. Right. So the law is flexible. We're heading towards the end. The law is flexible and it is secretive. Right? So you have darura, which is necessity. You can do an action forbidden by the law. And basically, the schools, all the legal schools agree. The legal schools, don't forget the 4 legal schools in Islam, agree that prohibitions of religious character may be disregarded in cases of necessity and danger. Not in cases of danger, just necessity. They don't define what that necessity is. And all of these offenses committed under the rule are excused without any form of punishment. The law can be broken. Kitman, a secret, a state of secrecy. Tawriya, mispointing information for secrecy, a double meaning. Muda'rat, treating others in a friendly manner while concealing your true attitude towards them. Do not let your enemy know he's your enemy. Taysir, hardship brings about facilitation, going along to get along. Any thoughts and comments?
No, I think this is pretty clear. And you said that all these definitions were coming from Yasser Qadi, or?
This one is from the Encyclopedia of Islam. In the video, guys, if you go to my channel, look at the most recent video. I show you where to find the Encyclopedia of Islam, all 12 copies of it, because it's 10 plus a supplement plus an index, and the index is actually very useful. Index is very, very useful. I use it more than I use the actual book itself. The index is actually quite complete and useful. So find a copy, download a copy, and use it.
And then Born Again said, what's happening on Thursday? And just to clarify, nothing on my end. Muhammad Amin just said that he was busy until Thursday, I guess. He's done this before where he says he can't respond for a few days.
Yeah, I know. I've seen that. Then he came back and got annoying.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he's busy, maybe he's not. It doesn't really matter. It just doesn't have any special significance.
He's got to go and ask his imam to lie to him.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if he needs to check with other people or he's really busy or whatever. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't have any special.
So he came back very well prepared the last time. I'm assuming he went and collected everything. He needed to go and get sources because, look, the guy's not that smart. He was obviously getting information. To me, he's getting information from someone. Yeah, Syed is saying, yeah, I was putting in evidence about Aisha's age, whatever, dude. Sorry, but the Quran, the Hadith, and the Sharia overrule you. Sorry, dude. Anyway, so Hudna. Let's talk about Hudna. Treaties. Now, Amin spoke about treaties before. So Hudna is an abstract noun. This is from the online version of the Encyclopedia of Islam. Is an abstract noun from the sense of calm or peace. In Islamic law, the abstention of in Islamic law is the abstention of the parties concerned from hostilities against each other. And notice the same word Hudna has multiple different words. There are 5 words, Hudna, and these 4 here, they all mean the same thing. So make a note, it's not always using the same word. The process of entering into a peace agreement, okay, is called blah, 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 but Hudna is the peace agreement, is the instrument, the legal instrument, right, legal instrument. And normal relations between the Dar al-Islam, the house of Islam, and the Dar al-Harb, the house of war or enemy lands, are not peaceful, right? So let's have a look further. Now, that's from the Encyclopedia of Islam. That's the online version. If you go online and use it, they only give you a handful of words out of usually there's pages, but they'll just grab a small piece because they want you to pay for a subscription. So the construction of churches or synagogues in the Muslim territory is unlawful. This is forbidden in the traditions, and this is in the Sharia. Sorry, not the Sharia, the Hadith. So when the Hadith say that Aisha was 9, Syed, she's 9 because this is law. Anyway, The sacred injunction, legal term, concerning war is sufficiently observed when it is carried on by any one party or tribe of Muslims, and it is then no longer of any force with respect to the rest. Slay the infidels, and also the saying of Muhammad, war is permanently established until the day of judgment, meaning that the ordinance respecting war, meaning the ordinance is a legal term. The observance, blah, blah, blah. So war is enjoined, legal term, enjoined, for the purpose of advancing the true faith, which is Islam. Now, notice here the word jihad fard, or ordained war. Ordained is a legal term as well. Enjoined, legal term, to be waged against infidels, the holy war. Now, let's have a look. We have the term not liable to a fine, and we'll get to the context of that in a minute, but fines are what you get for parking. I don't recall my priest fining me for something. And in this case, they're discussing killing. And if you murder people, well, okay, you don't have to pay a fine, it's okay. Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just a bit weird that a religion would have fines at all.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
know.
who are they paying the money to? Does
Yeah,
Allah need money?
exactly. So here again, they speaking of jihad, if the infidels, upon receiving the call to Islam, neither consent to it nor agree to pay tax, call upon Allah for assistance and make war upon them. Allah is the destroyers of his enemies, the infidels, that's us. Attack the infidels with all manner of warlike engines. This is all sanctified by the law, capital letters. This is all sanctified by the law. It is legal. Doing this is legal. Now let's have a look. Fighting the Jews and Christians is legislated in the Sharia because they are idolaters and disbelievers. Allah encourages the believers to fight the Jews, the disbelieving Jews and Christians who uttered this terrible statement against Allah. As for the Jews, they claim that Uzair was the son of Allah. Nonsense. There is no such reference anywhere. They made that up. Allah is free of what they attribute to him. As for the misguidance of Christians of the Isa, which is Esau, which is somehow Jesus, it is obvious. Allah declared both groups to be liars. But notice they're using sanctified by law and legislated. It is legal. So let's have a look at legislate. And it says to exercise the function of legislation, to make laws. Legislated, legislating, to create, provide, or control by legislation. Attempts to legislate morality, which they're doing, but this is law designed to control. Let's have a look at sanctify. Sanctify means to make holy, to set apart as sacred, to purify, to impart religious sanction to something, and to render legitimate or binding. So warfare on us is binding, it is legislated, but also if they do kill us, they are free from sin. So make a note. Let's move on. So now getting to Muhammad Amin's point about the treaties. Well, Hudna, the law can be broken. Freedom from all obligations is declared by Allah and his messenger with all whom you have made a treaty. This is a disavowal of all with whom you have made treaties. This is a declaration of disassociation from all whom we have made a treaty. A declaration of immunity to those pagans with whom you have contracted mutual alliances. Let's have a look further. That's Quran 9:1. Let's look at Quran 9:5. This is from Tafsir Ibn Kathir on 9:5. The honorable ayah 9:5 was called the ayah of the sword. It abrogated, cancelled every agreement of peace between the Prophet and any idolater, every treaty and every term. No idolater had any more treaty or promise of safety. I wonder what Amin's going to say about that.
I mean, my guess is he probably won't watch any further than he already watched. But if he does watch that far, I would definitely like to see what he has to say.
Yeah, but also what's interesting is that they are going to have to lie to counter our discussion of Islamic lying.
Yes, that is pretty ironic there.
Yeah.
Before you move on, Born Again was asking your channel name, and then he said, I see it. So I think that those two comments are related, but just in case, a link to Lloyd's channel is in the video description and the pinned comment. And Sonia has entered the building. So hello, Sonia.
Hi, Sonia. See, Syed talking nonsense in the comments. Syed, how about you show us how I am wrong? Don't talk about the Bible. We're not talking about the Bible today. We're talking about your Sharia. How about you go into the Sharia and show me how I'm wrong? Show me the Sharia that actually shows that I'm wrong and that Islam's religion of peace. How about you do that? Challenge. I know you can't. It's not possible. I know the Sharia better than you do, but way better. I mean, you're welcome to challenge me on this, but yeah, seriously, use your Sharia. Hi, Sonia. Thanks for joining us. So let's look at Hudna. Hudna is a peace agreement, a truce. It is equivalent to an international treaty. The object is to suspend the legal effects of hostilities. Notice the legal effects of hostilities, to provide the conditions of peace between the Muslims and the non-Muslims without the non-Muslims' territory becoming part of the Dar al-Islam. And notice Hudna was originally, it's meant for 10 years because Muhammad did that for 10 years with the tribe. So that is the typical period. Now, Hudna, again taken from the Encyclopedia of Islam, Hudna in Islamic law is the abstention of the parties concerned from hostilities against each other. In Islamic legal theory, normal relations between the Dar al-Islam and the Dar al-Harb were not peaceful. It's a state of latent or open hostilities, which jurists nowadays call a state of war. So short intervals of peace were permitted by divine legislation, by divine law, legal. And they talk about the Hudaybiyah Treaty, which provided a precedent. And this treaty was violated within 3 years. Muhammad found a pretext and he broke the treaty and he attacked these people. So most jurists, lawyers concur that the maximum period of treaty with the enemy should not exceed 10 years. Now, they go on to say treaties were on the whole brief. They barely ever reached 10 years. And in general, no attempt was made to supply the details of the treaty. So you didn't know what you were signing or agreeing to.
Yeah, it's a really interesting treaty there. We won't wage war with you for an unspecified period of time under unspecified conditions.
Yeah.
Very useful.
Yeah, really useful to their advantage. Now, treaties might be renewed. So at the moment, we're in a state of Hudna for a long time right now. But when things turn to their advantage, they are forced to go back to the Sharia. They will have to go back to this. Now, Hudna, broken promises and lies. So based on Muhammad's example of breaking the treaty of Hudaybiyah after 2 years by citing a Quraysh infraction, the sole function of the peace treaty, the Hudna, is to buy weakened Muslims time to regroup for a renewed offensive. How dare you talk about Sharia while your God wants blood as price for forgiveness? Symbolic blood, dude, symbolic. Whereas Allah actually wants slaughter. I'm going to show you in a second. Muhammad is quoted in Hadith saying, if I take an oath and I later find something else better, I do what is better and I break my oath. So anything that Muhammad does is right and it is legal. And if Muhammad breaks an oath because he finds something better, any Muslim can do it.
Yep, he's setting the example. So, you know, they can say all they want. It's illegal for us to break an oath. It's illegal for us to break a treaty. It's illegal for us to lie, whatever. Even if you say it's illegal, if there are conditions you're allowed to break that, then it's not really the case. It's meaningless words to say it's illegal to lie or it's illegal to break an oath. Because I mean, Muhammad right here, Sahih narration says, if I take an oath and I find something better, then I'll break the oath. And that's pretty open-ended. You can say anything's better. I mean, that's completely a judgment call. Yeah,
and that's Bukhari, volume 7, book 67, hadith 427. So hypocrisy and supremacism in Sunnah is Sunnah in Islam. It is Sunnah. One rule for me, another for thee. For instance, if others break their oaths to Muslims, they are to be fought. Quran 9:12. If the unbelievers break their oaths after the agreement, fight the leaders of unbelief. Surely their oaths are nothing. Hypocrisy, man. What hypocrisy.
Yeah, so, sorry, all of Surah 9 is just a gold mine. And of course, this is one of the very last surahs.
Say the last one,
so, I mean, the whole thing is just, basically the whole chapter is justification for Muhammad wanting to break a treaty. And, you know, if this is the last thing revealed, even if we were talking about the Quran here, this is the last final marching orders for Muslims is make war and break treaties if needed.
Yeah, exactly that. Just to look, I mean, obviously, Syed is feeling a bit of pain. Let me just read this. Allah tells Muhammad, a prophet must slaughter before collecting captives. Captives, slaves. A slaughtered enemy is driven from the land. Muhammad, you craved the desires of this world, its goods and the ransom that captives would bring. But Allah desires killing them to manifest the religion. So yeah, that's some real slaughter, and that's some real blood before taking captives. That's what Allah wants. And you're moaning about the blood of Jesus being a symbolic act, at least from our perspective now. So yeah, interesting, fascinating. And also, it says that Muhammad was lured by this world, by its goods and the ransom, the money that captives would bring. Muhammad was lured by this, whereas Jesus was tempted and never sinned. So yeah, we have a difference already. So let's have a look. You've killed non-Muslims. There's no fine at all. There's no fine for murder. That's freaking awesome. I need to get into that. I can go and kill my enemies and they were bad people, Lloyd. No fine for you. You can just go home. Thanks, man. So if a Muslim attacks infidels without calling them to the faith, he is an offender, criminal, bad guy, bad Muslim, because this is forbidden. Oh my God, it's forbidden. Yeah, it's against the law. But yet, if he does attack them before inviting them, and he slays them, he kills them, and he takes their property, you don't have neither a fine or any expiation or any atonement is due. Wow, awesome. Awesome, because that which protects, namely Islam, does not exist in them. This Sharia manual is called the Hidayah. It's a 4-volume set. It might have more volumes. I don't know. I only have 4 of them. It's several thousand pages long. It's really lengthy, and it goes into extreme detail on these things. So whereas the Reliance of the Traveler, the Umdat al-Salik, is a summary, which is a really very good book. It's a summary of everything. It's a compact 1 volume with everything you need. This one is multiple volumes, and it goes into extreme length on a lot of these topics. So think, in the same manner now as the slaying of women or infant children of infidels is forbidden, but if notwithstanding a Muslim were to slay them, he is not liable to a fine. In Islam, yeah.
Sorry, I was just gonna say this is probably my favorite slide in the whole thing, because it's like, it has the Muslim talking point that it's forbidden, but then it says, but if it happens, no penalty. So
yeah,
it's the least bad thing you could possibly do. It's not allowed, but there's no penalty of any kind. Allah doesn't really care. Don't do it, but if you do, oh well, who cares?
Yes, the Prophet came to establish justice. Yeah, he came here to murder women and infant children. That's clearly, and to drink camel urine, as we discovered. But don't kill women and children, except you can, and it's okay because you won't be fined. So the Sharia, this is the Sharia. This is not Syed, this is Sharia, right? In the same manner as the slaying of women or infant children, if you do it, there is no fine. They're not talking about prison. They're not talking about some kind of capital punishment. It's like, yeah, it's okay. We did it. No problem. This is the Sharia, right? Hidayah, this is volume 2 on the manner of waging war in chapter 2. You can download a copy. I have links to this in my videos on YouTube. So peace is temporary, but war is the law. So namely 10 years, that's the peace treaty, the Hudna. But if it is in the Muslim interests to break it, you may lawfully renew the war. Now, what is interesting here, what they say that is very interesting, we are almost done, we're just about finished. Here it says that observance of it is a desertion of war. In other words, peace is a desertion of war, right? And war is an ordinance of Allah. War is ordained. It is a legal requirement. It is compulsorily given to you by Allah. And let's see what it says here, that to be peaceful is to desert war. But they speak of where it advances the Muslim interests, peace is the same as war, as it answers the same purpose, namely the advantage of the Muslims, their advantage. Yet, this is not the case where advantage is no longer derived from it. If there is no more an advantage to peace, they should revert to war, and the treaty can be broken. So being peaceful is a desertion of war unless peace gives you an advantage. This is also the Hidayah volume 2. That's page 145 and 146. If you download it, Hidayah volume 2. If you go into Adobe Acrobat, you go to page it's not page 145 and 146 in the book itself. Just click on page 145 in the search bar, and it will take you to those pages. Right, so let's look at ordinance. An ordinance is an authoritative rule or law law, again, a decree or a command ordained as by a deity. Okay? And war is an observance of a divine ordinance, and atonement is not due for anything which may happen in the fulfillment of a divine ordinance, because war, killing is a divine ordinance. And if you kill the women and children, nothing will happen to you. There's no atonement. There is no punishment for anything which you do in the fulfillment of Allah's order to go to war and kill the infidel, because they don't want apprehension of becoming liable to atonement. They don't want you to not kill and not commit the act because you are scared of becoming guilty of atonement.
Good
So
stuff.
every law can be broken. They are. So let's have a look. Second last slide. Oaths, exceptions, and deceptions. Hanifa alleges if a man should swear by the truth of God, this does not constitute an oath. I swear by the truth of Allah, I will do this, or I will do that is not an oath. This does not constitute an oath. If a person were to say, I will do this truly, it does not amount to an oath. An oath is not worthy of credit unless it is taken in the name of Allah. So any oath a Muslim makes, any promise he gives that is not in the name of Allah is not an oath. It is not binding. Whoever takes an oath otherwise than in the name of Allah is most certainly an infidel, an associated, an infidel, right? A kafir, in other words. And not only that, there's a stipulation in the Sharia that let's say you've besieged the town and now you want to let these people out because they've given up. They said, okay, fine, we sign a treaty. We come to an agreement. You let us go. You take the city, you take everything, you let us go. You give an oath. They say it is better that you give an oath in your name than in the name of Allah, because it is better that you break an oath you gave in your name than one you gave in the name of the Prophet or in the name of Allah. And also because in the Sharia, it stipulates that to let enemies go, if they're going to just join the army and come back and fight you again, is illegal. So hence, given that stipulation, you can break the oath. So there literally is, they can break anything. So war is an observance of divine ordinance, divine ordinance, divine ordinance, and that is to say it is enjoined and authorized in the sacred writings. Enjoined is a legal term. Authorized is a legal term, and the sacred writings are legal texts. They're not holy texts. They are unholy texts. These are the works of lawyers. Seriously, it is just legal text. So this is our final slide. Any comments or thoughts from the commentary?
Just a couple housekeeping things.
Syed, the Old Testament is not binding on Christians. Like seriously, you need to learn some exegesis. Stop being stupid, please.
Yeah, so I was letting Syed go because people were interacting with him, but I was personally ignoring his off-topic comments. Also, there was a good comment from Hunter a little while ago that says he's convinced that Syed is a bot programmed by Zakir Naik, which I couldn't believe.
I believe that. I believe that.
The Honest Truth says that he just came across my channel and subscribed. So thank you very much for that, The Honest Truth. He says that he normally watches Christian Prince live streams. So welcome, Honest Truth. Be sure to check out some of my content after this. This is the third in this series on what we call Islam's ApoLIEgetics. Lots of good material, lots of material that you don't hear very often on other channels. So check that out. Go ahead and do the last slide. And then I want to end by talking a little bit about how this contrasts with the Bible. Yeah, we can always take some questions as well at that point. So it is noteworthy that Shafi, the founder of so that's one of the four major schools of Islamic jurisprudence, Shafi'i, the founder of the science of usul al-fiqh, fundamentally rejected istihsan because he feared that a loophole would be made for arbitrary decisions. This is the reasoning that these jurists are using, istihsan. And he feared that a loophole would be made for arbitrary decisions. So he said back then that, look, guys, this is going to lead to corruption, right? In Islam, there is no but. However, this is also so they're relying on a hadith, and it says here, in Islam, there is no injury or malicious damage. In other words, Islam is perfect. It cannot cause injury and it cannot cause malicious damage. Anything it does is for the good. And on other testimony from the Quran, the Sunnah, and the Ijma, that is the consensus of all the Muslims, of all the scholars rather, later representatives of the fiqh, the law,
champion the principle that the whole Sharia furthers or is intended to further the welfare of man. It is for your own good. The ijma is the third, but in practice, the most important of the bases of Islamic religious law. Ijma is a source of law, and it was a result of the need to perpetuate a truth given by the Quran and corroborated by the Sunnah. The scholars then thought about this, did an exegesis of it, and then from there, they went and wrote the Sharia, which is the application of these ideas and concepts to numerous examples. So ijma is the consensus. So in other words, the Quran and the Sunnah are not the primary sources of law. Once those books had been examined and exhausted and the Sharia had been written, they superseded both the Quran and the Sunnah. And the consensus, which is in the Sharia, is now the primary source of law. And the Quran is no longer quoted on its own, and neither is the Sharia, sorry, the Sunnah, the Hadiths, quoted on their own. They're only quoted. Normal, regular Muslims, idiots like Said and so on, will quote verses on their own. The scholars quote it as part of the ijma. In other words, they quote it as part of the Sharia because it is quoted within a Sharia ruling to give it context. And I would hope that Said is happy because you guys always talk about out of context. Well, the Sharia has the correct context of all the Quranic verses and all of the Hadith. And that should make you happy that we are reading every single one of these verses in complete correct context. And that's me. I'm done.
All right, go ahead and back up one slide to the one on oaths, just as an introduction to what I want to talk about. So I wanted to contrast Islam's teaching here about oaths, how you can break an oath if it's not made in the name of God, and you can even break it if it's made in the name of God, if necessary. So, you know, these legal scholars are debating some the finer points about when it's okay to break an oath and when it's not. And this gives me a good opportunity to talk about Jesus's teaching. My comments on YouTube are lagging behind a couple minutes. So Lloyd, if you want to take a look at the comment and see any questions you want to address while I'm talking.
Some hysterically funny comments in here, man. These guys are funny.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now.
Yeah, okay.
Share. So this is from the 5th chapter of Matthew. It's part of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is talking about oaths here, and starting in verse 33, says again, "And you have heard it said of those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord that you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is the footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simple yes or no. Anything more comes from evil." So Jesus here is saying that, you know, just be honest. There's no need to swear an oath. If you're always honest, then people will know that what you're saying is honest. You don't have to swear up and down, say, you know, say, oh, I really mean it this time. You know, I'm known for lying, but I really mean it this time. Therefore, I'm going to swear by this thing or that thing. So I just wanted to point that out. And then I wanted to go up to the start of the section on the law, because, you know, even Christians mostly tend to think of this as good ethical teaching, which it is, but it's also a lot more what Jesus is doing here. I'll start with verse 17, since Muslims love to quote the first half of this. "Do not think I have come to abolish the law." And then that's the end of the verse as far as Muslims are concerned. "Or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." So I'm going to pop over to Carson's commentary here. He says, "The formula 'do not think that' is repeated by Jesus from 10:34 earlier in Matthew. Jesus' two sayings were designed to set aside potential misunderstandings as to the nature of the kingdom. ironic that Muslims go to this passage to purposely misunderstand Jesus's message when when his purpose is the exact opposite. Carson goes on to write, Jesus' mission was not to abolish, but not exclusively. Jesus' mission was not to abolish the law or the prophets. By these words, Matthew forms a new inclusio, which marks out the body of the sermon and shows that Jesus is taking pains to relay his teaching and place in the history of redemption to the Old Testament scriptures. So this phrase, the law and the prophets, isn't necessarily referring to the legal code, right? It's referring to the Old Testament. The phrase, the law or the prophets,
The
is
first the first 5 books are known as the law, and the prophets are the next 15 books of the Old Testament. That's
yeah.
what that's the
So
law and the prophets.
yeah. So the phrase is used as a shorthand for the Hebrew scriptures. So he's saying,
Mhm.
I haven't come to abolish the scriptures. He's not necessarily talking about law. It includes law, sure, but he's really saying that these scriptures were written about me, that I've come to fulfill them. So Carson goes on, he talks about the various ways that people have tried to understand this passage. And then he concludes that the best interpretation that Jesus fulfills the laws and the prophets and that they point to him, he is their fulfillment. The antithesis is not between abolish and keep, as Muslims would phrase it, but rather between abolish and fulfill. For Matthew, then, it's not a question of Jesus's relationship to the law that is in doubt, but rather its relationship to him. Therefore, we give fulfill exactly the same meaning as the formula quotations in the prologue of Matthew that have already laid great stress on the prophetic nature of the Old Testament and the way it points to Jesus. So Jesus here isn't claiming that he is reinforcing the legalistic code. What he's saying is that the Old Testament is about him. And then Carson cites 11:13 of Matthew as further emphasis of this. So he concludes, just like in the parallel passage in Luke, Jesus is not announcing the termination of the Old Testament's relevance and authority, but he's saying that the period which men were related to God under the terms of the law has ceased with the coming of John the Baptist, and the nature of its valid continuity is established only in reference to Jesus and the kingdom. Flipping back over to the biblical text, Jesus goes on to explain that, for I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of God. This is, Christians talk about the good news, the gospel, but there is no good news unless there's first bad news. And the Sermon on the Mount is really the bad news. Jesus here is saying, unless you are more righteous than these people who are known for being super duper righteous, fulfilling the tiniest dots of the law, then you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. So how is anyone to enter the kingdom of heaven then? Well, in Christ, we receive his righteousness. He takes our sin upon himself and gives us his righteousness. When we place our trust in Jesus, we no longer have to rely on ourselves. Islam is a very legalistic religion, as we've been talking about today. And this isn't very unusual. Most of the world's religions are very legalistic. They say, follow these laws, do these things, try harder, you'll be a better person, and then you'll achieve salvation on your own merits. The message of Christianity is the exact opposite. The message of Christianity is that there is nothing you can do to achieve salvation on your own merits. You are a fallen human being. You are imperfect. God is perfect. God demands perfection. And the only way you can be perfect is if you no longer or if you no longer try to achieve your own righteousness, but accept the free gift of Jesus's righteousness on your behalf. So I just wanted to end the talk with that contrast. A lot in Islam is the direct opposite of Christianity. I think Muslims might even agree with that statement. But the message of Christianity is that God loves us so much that he gives a free gift that if we trust in him, we can achieve salvation. We can be reunited with God in a perfect relationship. Islam and most of the world's religions teach that you can do it on your own, which if you really honestly examine your life, you'll know that that's not true. It doesn't matter how many legal loopholes you allow yourself, you still won't be able to follow the law perfectly. People aren't able to live up even to their own sets of standards, let alone God's set of standards. So that's what I wanted to say. Are there any interesting comments you would like to address?
Yeah, look, there's some really smart guys who really know this stuff in the comments. So between your channel and Sonia, there's some really educated people. Notice that Amin and Syed and all the other idiots, they never, and this is their kryptonite. This is their kryptonite. They never quote the Sharia. Have you ever seen them quote the Sharia? Once. I never have.
No.
Right? So clearly, they are not allowed to quote the Sharia. I don't know what. Maybe they're not allowed. Maybe they, who knows? But for some reason, they will never, ever quote the Sharia. Now, the Sharia is the final ultimate law. All these Quran verses are irrelevant. They're completely irrelevant, right? Because the Quran can be used to argue literally any side of an argument. Kill people, quote the Quran. Don't kill people, quote the Quran. You can literally do any argument. But the Sharia is definitive. The Quran is sophist. The Sharia is definitive. The Sharia is very clear. If they were able to prove their point from the Sharia, they can prove me wrong. Feel free, go to the Sharia manuals, quote the Sharia text that you're using, so we can check its authenticity and make sure that it's a really authoritative Sharia manual, but they never do. Why do these Muslims never? And my statement is they are ashamed of the Sharia. You are humiliated, embarrassed, and ashamed of your Sharia. Because why can you not quote it? If Sharia is so amazing, and you always tell us Sharia is incredible, the whole world needs it. We have to force it on you by force of arms, with blood, right? If the Sharia is so awesome, why can't you quote it to me? Why are you so ashamed of this diarrhea law? Sorry, my bad, I misnamed it. Sharia, whatever works for you guys. If diarrhea law is so awesome, why are you ashamed, embarrassed, humiliated, and unwilling to quote it for us? If it is so perfect and so awesome, why don't you do it? Do it. Show me from the Sharia. Prove me wrong. Seriously, quote the Sharia. I'm not interested in your nonsense. This Quran nonsense. Don't stop going in circles. Quote me the Sharia law. Show me the definitive law of Allah. I'd love to see it. But you people are too embarrassed to do it. You're humiliated by it. So, sorry, that was my point. Any comments, any questions from the audience, please?
I was just trying to read through them. I obviously wasn't reading them while I was talking, so I'm sure that there's some things I missed. I'll take another look after it's uploaded. Muhammad Amin, why don't you talk about the Bible? What did I just do? I just talked about the Bible.
Why don't they talk about the Sharia, Muhammad Amin? Why don't you quote us? Why do you quote us? Let us know the exact book. Every single book that I've referenced, I've provided links to all of these for you to download and read. We know the Sharia. Christians know the Sharia better than you do. But what is the secrecy? What are you hiding? Got something you're feeling guilty about?
Good question. A little while ago, Billy asked a interesting question. He said, seeing that loopholes abound in Islamic law to allow all kinds of questionable behavior, is justice even a goal in Islam?
No. Justice according to the Sharia, yes, but they have a different idea of what justice is versus what we have, what justice is. The whole goal is to make Sharia dominant across the earth. That is really the whole point of Islam, is to establish Islam across the world. That is what is most important.
It says, are you not humiliated like your cursed God who died on the cross? And thanks, Ed.
We talk about Jesus dying on the cross all the time. I hear that in church on Sunday.
Yeah, thanks for giving me another opportunity to talk about Jesus. I think that maybe the true God is really calling you here, because you keep bringing up things that I love to talk about. So no, I'm not humiliated by Jesus dying on the cross. Uh, Definitely not. This is the greatest act of love that anyone could possibly do, to die for another person's sake. So, you know, uh, I, Islam, Christianity agree that humanity's really messed up. We do a lot of bad things. Your solution is try harder and find legal loopholes to get out of stuff, and pretend that it's okay, that Allah doesn't care, and he'll just forgive you no matter what you do. But Christianity offers a real solution. Uh, because Jesus is God incarnate, because Jesus lived a perfect life, he is able to take our sin upon himself. God says, you know, you guys screwed up a lot, but I'm going to take responsibility for that. I'm going to take your sin. I'm going to die in a very graphic way. I'm going to show you that this is how much I love you, that I care about you so much that even humiliating myself is not too much for me. This is Islam's picture of God. So say your kid is outside playing in the mud and he hurts himself. This is what Islam says. The father goes out and says, can you get out of the mud? It's kind of humiliating for me to get in the mud and come help you. Get yourself out of the mud, then I'll do something for you. Christianity's picture of God is the father dives in, rescues his injured son, carries him out, and takes care of him. So, I mean, thanks for giving me the opportunity to get that message out there yet
Yeah,
again.
notice they're still not quoting the Sharia. They're not. I'm talking about the Sharia. They're still not. I want to share my screen again. If you can just put my screen back. There's something that they're doing that I want to just.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, has it popped up?
It hasn't yet.
Okay. So, am I? Oh, do I have to share it again or?
Oh yeah, you have to share it again, because when I shared mine, it overwrites
Oh, of
yours.
course, yeah. So let me share this again. My bad. So, um, they're trying to embarrass us over the fact that Jesus died the way he did for sin, right? For their sin too, for that matter. But they were talking about Jesus was dragged and beaten. And I want to read this from the Hadith, Sahih Bukhari. Isha said, when the Prophet became sick and his condition became serious, he requested his wives to allow him to be treated in my house, and they allowed him. He came out leaning on two men while his feet were dragging on the ground, right? In Sunan ibn Majah, Aisha said, I never saw anyone suffer more pain than the messenger of Allah. So Muhammad died terribly as well after his poisoning, his well-deserved poisoning. So this isn't just a case of, this isn't just a case of, he died a noble hero. No, he died suffering and he died in pain. And I want to mention, this is my database, just for everyone else. This is my Islam database, right? I have, I don't know, hundreds of, okay, let's just go to my page on jihad. Let's just that one. These are all my entries on jihad. If I start here, you can tell I have thousands of entries in this book. I have just about every single authoritative reference to jihad in the entire Islamic scripture, in everything is listed here. And that's my first page. I have all these pages on jihad. I have a massive, massive database. Okay. I have a huge database on just about every subject you can think of in Islam. I have captured everything you can possibly think of. It is here. Now, I've made a public version of this database, which is only about 10 pages. I have hundreds of pages here, but for people who need to know. But just so you know, Muhammad died suffering, right? And of course, he's actually, hold on, there's one more point. Let me make this point here as well. Let me get to that, the death and last words of Muhammad. You do realize Muhammad said, so in Quran 69, 44 to 46, it says, if Muhammad had made up about us lies, Allah says, if Muhammad had made up lies about us, we would have seized him by the right hand, then we would have cut his aorta, right? We would have cut his aorta. That is Quran 69, 44 to 46. Muhammad's dying words were, neither the Jews nor the Christians shall be left in Arabia, okay? So, but now let's have a look here. Let's have a look for the word aorta in this page, right? So we know that Allah says, if Muhammad had lied about us, if he had made up sayings, we would cut his aorta. Let's go in Quran. So let's have a look. And it says there's multiple versions I have here, aorta. And let us see, in the Muslim commentaries, okay, we would surely have severed his life artery, the aorta of the heart. That is in Tafsir Jalalain. They confirm that Muhammad died. Okay, that was the quote. And let me go here. Sahih Bukhari 44:28, the Prophet in his ailment in which he died used to say, Aisha, I still feel the pain caused by the food I ate at Khubr, at Khaybar. And at this time, I feel as if my aorta is being cut. He goes on to say, Muhammad says in Sunan Abu Dawud 44:98, this is the time when it has cut my aorta. And he says in Sunan Abu Dawud 44:49, this is the time when it has cut off my aorta. It says here in Tabari, volume 8, page 124, Bishop, at this very moment, I feel my aorta being severed. Allah says himself, if Muhammad has lied about me, I will cut his aorta. And Muhammad himself confirms when he dies, his aorta is being cut. So lie to me in the comments, because that's what you guys do. So please put your lies down in the comments. But just maybe I will believe your scriptures and not your lies. There's a small possibility of that. That's all I have to say.
Very good.
Muhammad was a liar, blunt. Allah killed him because of it.
Well, I don't know if Allah killed him, but the true God might have taken his boast and used that to reveal the falsity of Islam.
Yeah, yeah. So that's everything for me. I hope everyone's learned something. And yeah, guys, please, if you like more of this content, let us know what you want to talk about, and please subscribe to my channel as well. And thanks for the support.
Yep. So we're going to wrap it up now. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. Thanks again for the super chat earlier. Like Lloyd said, if you haven't already subscribed to his channel, please do so. The link is in the video description and in the pinned comment. Let us know in the comments, in particular for the Christians who are finding this material useful, that are using it for their own outreach efforts. Let us know what you're finding useful, what you'd like to see us cover in future episodes. We definitely plan to do more of these. It's not always obvious what people find useful and what they don't. So if you could let us know in the comments, that would be very helpful. One last time for the Muslims watching, if you want to engage us in the comments afterwards, that is great, but please do make sure you're citing valid sources. For example, saying something about the Bible is not a defense of Sharia law. Saying something about the Quran is not a defense of Sharia law. Bring us some valid sources or you will be ignored. And if you persist after I warn you that you're off topic, I will simply delete your comments and then no one will see them. So you'll just be wasting your own time if you're going to put off topic crap in the comment section.
Yeah, cool, man. Thank you, guys.
All right, everyone, have a good afternoon, evening, morning, whatever time of day it is where you are, and we will see you next time.